The best love stories don't start with fireworks.
Sometimes they start in the ashes of what was lost.
Tyler Perry Studios presents 2025's Ruth and Boaz as a modern reimagining of the biblical story of Ruth and Boaz, one of the most endearing love stories of all time.
This is a non-spoiler review followed by a spoiler discussion of Ruth and Boaz.
I'm Heit.
And I'm Cheri.
And you've discovered Axiom Amnesia.
We want to thank all of the supporters who helped to make this video possible. If you want your name to appear alongside these contributors, make a one-time donation of $5 or more via our website at axiom.app, Cash App, or you can head on over to patreon.com/axiomamnesia to enjoy all of the benefits of becoming a monthly subscriber. So this movie is now streaming on Netflix as of late September 2025. And this, as we mentioned, will be both a non-spoiler and spoiler review of the film. So just a little bit of background for you. The producers, this is, it's a Tyler Perry Studios production.
What? Y'all don't understand, because we've been talking about this and probably in multiple videos, that he should be basically the studio for Black films, right?
And we're starting to really see that. So the producers of the film are Tyler Perry and Devon Franklin. Devon Franklin is the ex-husband, if I'm not mistaken, of Megan Good. Yes. And so the film was also directed by Alanna Brown, and it was written by Michael Elliott and Corey Tynan. And so the film is actually part of a collaboration between Tyler Perry Studios and Devon Franklin, and with Netflix, in which they'll produce faith-based films under a multi-year and multi-picture first look deal. So there will be more stories to come. And So
like the Hallmark, the Black Hallmark. Basically.
Yeah, kind of like, the Black Hallmark stories, which, I love a good Hallmark film, especially the Christmas ones. I think I talked to you guys about that before, where I could just binge like all of these different Hallmark Christmas love story movies. I love them. So for those of you who want the non-spoiler review, we will let you know when you can hop off the call. But for right now, we're not spoiling it. We're going to do our rating and everything so that you can kind of know whether it's worth the watch. So the cast of the film, Ruth is played by Soraya. Y'all probably remember her from Empire. And then Tyler Lepley plays Boaz. Felicia Rashad plays Naomi. We don't even need an introduction for her. Everybody knows who she is. Walnut Santiago plays Lena, Nija Brina plays Brianna, and James Lee Thomas plays Cyrus. And guess who else is in the film? A couple of other notables. JD, but Babyface plays himself.
Dupri and Babyface, they both play themselves.
Yeah, and a couple of other famous faces from the Atlanta area. So let's get to our ratings of the film. I'll start with the plot. All right, for the plot of the film, I'm going to actually give the plot a 6.
Ooh.
And the reason that the plot is so low has to do with certain deviations from the actual story that I feel are critical and that just missed the mark. So I'm going to give the plot a 6.
Yeah. Okay, all right, I understand that. But for me, I'll just give it a 5. I'm going to give it a 4. Sorry. So the thing is that when you are watching it, it's like I say, it's like a Hallmark movie. It seems very simple plot. The typical thing that you always gonna see, with your antagonist, people searching down somebody, how it goes.
Yeah. And I mean, it had a lot of elements of kind of a Tyler Perry typical film or even a Tubi movie, like that kind of level of stuff.
Yeah,
so,
but if it's going to be like biblical, it kind of has to be light, right?
Yes.
If that's the audience you're going for, I don't think you really want juicy drama or thriller in the same sort of a way.
If you stay true to what happens, I mean, the Bible is full of some juicy drama.
But it's modern times too, and how do you adapt that?
So we're going to talk more about that in the full-on discussion, but, so that we don't ruin it for people. But yeah, so like that was a huge beef for me. Now, let's talk about entertainment value. For entertainment, I'm actually going to go ahead and give it an 8. And the reason I give it an 8 is because if I never knew that this was quote unquote Ruth and Boaz and I just watched it, I like these types of movies. I'm entertained, so I'm okay with, kind of, I go into it knowing what to expect. I was entertained. So I'm going to give it an 8 for that reason.
Yeah. So Soraya, right, I guess she's a singer.
She's a singer.
In Empire, she was a singer. I don't know what she done after that. But the songs weren't my type of songs, right? And that probably are my type of music, especially if you're like, we're creating music. We got JD in here, you know what I'm saying, who brought Mariah back up with the emancipation of Mimi, you know what I'm saying? And then you got Babyface, who just has his whole slew of hits back.
Right.
And, so then when we get that together, I'm like, oh, the kind of okay part was when Babyface and them was singing, right? But the story didn't keep me there, and those sort of things. I like seeing Felicia Rashad, right? But in the beginning, I'm like, yeah, I wonder what happened. But then, once the pivotal turn happens, you know what I'm saying, which tells me the problem, then I'm just kind of like, yeah, I'm falling out of it, and I really don't care because the second half of the film is just kind of a bunch of stuff that I don't really care about, and they really didn't do the romantic thing to keep me in there, right? So I don't care about their story. So I'll give it a 5 for entertainment. I don't care about their love story, which is, I think, pivotal to this actual story, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so many things are pivotal that I was kind of like, okay, but let's keep on with our ratings. For cinematography, I'm going to give cinematography a 7. As always, the stuff with Tyler Perry Studios, the director, it's competent. There was nothing super exceptional about it. So, it's not like it's 10 worthy or anything like that. It just, it met the standards, was, maybe even a little better than that, but no big deal, so yeah. I'm giving that a 7 for cinematography.
Want us to cover your favorite movie ASAP? A one-time contribution of just $50 or more to Axiom Amnesia gets you a deep dive on demand, a 30-minute discussion on any film you choose.
It's easy. Step 1, send $50 via our website, axiom.app, where you can pay via card, Apple Pay, or you can pay directly via Cash App at $Axiom Amnesia. See the links below. Step 2, tell us your movie, email, the name you want to appear on screen, and what kind of deep dive you want. General, a specific character, a particular aspect of the film, etc. Step 3, watch your deep dive on demand with your name listed as executive producer.
Lock in your deep dive on demand today and hurry. Spots are limited.
This offer is not valid for filmmakers or distributors. Subject to availability and terms apply.
Yeah, so me too, I'll give it about the same because, meet standards, and it's like, you don't look at the movie and be like, this is bad. It don't look good, so yeah, they did it.
So then sound, I'm actually judging because there are songs, there's music in here. This is not a musical per se. I know we've been doing like the Tyler Perry plays that are kind of really very music influenced and infused. This was, there were songs in here, but this is not a musical. And it was, I guess I'd call it, a few songs interwoven in between here because, the main character is an actual singer. So I'm including that in my sound score. And for me, the sound, I'm going to give it an 8. Here's the deal. Heit mentioned that he did not like the music that was in here because it wasn't the style. So the music is really kind of country based. It takes place the bulk of the film outside of Nashville. And so it's country based, and even the songs that are the spiritual songs or the inspirational songs they sound more like CCM than like traditional gospel songs, right? Yeah. So
but
there's
on
that.
Front, I think that's what the gospel has become, the black gospel, basically, right? Or black Christian music. It's kind of like CCM as well.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Contemporary Christian music, meaning that, yeah.
But I think that, so I don't think my big thing is the music, right? I don't know why we're doing this country thing, right? It's like, if something is country, then that means, or rural, then you mean that country music is just what those people into. First off, she came from the city, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you got the other people there. Just because they're country or rural, then that means that that's the music they listen to. But I think that's the music of black people who hang around white people in those areas, right? But I don't think that just because someone's black that it's like that. If you go where I'm from, right, all over Louisiana, and you hear the music that the black folks whose country listen to, it ain't what we consider country music, which is derivatives of the blues, which white people took and called country music in their way. It's not black music. It's white people's branch off of the blues. And I don't think that's what people, black people listen to, but I'm sure somebody gonna be like, I listen to it. Which
and right now, and I grew up listening to a whole lot of country music, like straight out country, Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers. I told y'all the story of how the teacher, when I was in about second grade, the teacher was like, if y'all are good this week, we could put the Kenny Rogers record on Friday, and we would be like straight out singing Kenny Rogers.
Yeah.
I know all the songs, I know all the words, so.
Yeah. But it might be applicable now because a lot of people are trying to get into it because it's a trendy thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So
and that's the thing. Right now, it's trendy. So for those, so for those black folks who loved country music the whole time, so to me that was just part of my youth.
Yeah.
I loved country music. And then there was a point, I feel like in the 90s, where country became a lot more mainstream. So then you had pop artists that might not have been traditional country, but we knew who they were. And then as time went on, it just kind of became less the same thing that kind of happened with R&B and some of the popular urban sounds.
Yeah.
It became more mainstream and considered more generalized also, and watered down as compared with the traditional versions of those genres, right? And then like now it's kind of a different thing, but it's just popular right now. Beyonce helped popularize everybody doing it, and we've got like some actual real black country music stars who are out here singing country music and stuff. And, and it's not downing it. It's just, it's a different perspective that was represented in this film in terms of the music.
Yeah, right. So then that's the music, but it's not the music that I'm into. It doesn't touch me emotionally, right? So when you have the blues and gospel from back in the day that spins off into soul and R&B that would turn into the more contemporary of the 80s and 90s, that R&B and those type of ballads are what move me. So when I hear country, I don't have that attachment, and it doesn't sound that way in the film, which takes away from the sound a bit, right? So I just try to say that, I have to say all that to say that I'll give it a 7 because the sound and everything else is good. It's just that the music wasn't where it was, and that's a big part of it if you're saying that this is part of this character. Now, I don't feel your character because of the output in their art.
Right. So when we get to editing, for me, the editing, I'm gonna just give the editing what I feel is a reasonable meet standards kind of score, which would be a 7 for me. There was nothing exceptional. There weren't any particular, shots or anything that just had to come together. Like, it was very basic. It wasn't, infused with a lot of artistry or anything like that. So, for me, the editing as a 7 is reasonable.
Yeah, so I'll do the same. I'll give it a 7 for those same reasons.
And so for the final category of acting. All right. So we talk about, we had seasoned, actors in here. It wasn't like this is, somebody's first role and we never saw them. Okay. We have to start with Phylicia Rashad. Phylicia Rashad is just a stellar, hands down, amazing actress. And, there's one particular scene where she just really like gets your heart, pulls at your heartstrings. And so to me, the acting from there wasn't anybody who I felt like failed at acting and where I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. Everybody was at least meet standard and convincing in their roles. So we're starting at that point, but I do think that the chemistry that was there that we saw between the main characters, the chemistry that was between friendships, all of that stuff was pretty good. And so for acting, I'm going to go ahead and give it an 8. It's not, I mean, these are not Oscar worthy performances, but I think an 8 is a fair score on
I don't
the
know.
acting.
When I get up there to the 8s, then I'm thinking of, this Oscar worthies, right? Because I don't know if I just say the greatest are the 10s all the time in those specific works, right? It depends on what came out the year too. But I just think that Soraya is a competent actress. And then you have the Tyler guy, Tyler Lepley. Yeah, you have him, and he's, he's just, I think, the run-of-the-mill black male actor with a beard. You know what I'm saying? Like, he could have just been replaced with anybody else.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's clear. He plays the hunks in his, like, his physical appearance has a whole lot to do.
He plays the boyfriend, husband, fiance roles, right? And then you have Phylicia Rashad, who is good. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't a 10 performance. So with the acting too, I'll give it a 7 because none of them were bad.
Right. So for the final scores, I gave it a 7.2 overall, and Heit gave it a 5.9. And, so do you feel like it's worth the watch?
Yeah. If you miss it, you ain't missing much, I would say.
Well, let me say this. I do think it's worth the watch, and especially is worth the watch if you like these Hallmark type of love story movies, okay?
But it's a, I guess you could call it a Bible movie. What do you call the Hallmark church movies? It's like a Christmas movie.
Yeah,
right?
kind of like, the sort of Christian family movies or whatever, Christian romance or whatever. I mean, it would fall into that category, but I just love...
Cheri has a kinfolk who makes those movies, or at least made one.
Yes, and yes, I do. And, we even went to see it in the theaters. It was very amazing. I like these kinds of movies. I love inspirational movies, inspirational stories, and I do like films.
What did this inspire you for?
Did this inspire me? So like, and we'll get to that in the spoiler portion, the issues that I had with the film. But like, if this film wasn't called Ruth and Boaz and I just watched it, then I'm good. I don't even know, like if this wasn't the characters' names, that's I'm
probably
good.
A mistake, right? If they just said it was something else, right? And it's a faith-based movie.
Love the second time around, whatever,
But maybe then it won't hit the audience that they're trying to hit as readily.
Right, because you're setting a bar when you say, even if you say reimagining, I know the story, the biblical story, I know like the back of my hand. And so I'm expecting this to be along those lines, even if it's reimagined, even if it's modernized. I'm expecting the core pieces of the story and the lessons and all of that to show through. And there were a few problems in that area that we're going to discuss in just a minute. Yeah. Right. But I do think it's worth the watch if you like these kind of movies. And even if you don't, like, I don't think it's a waste of time. It's all right. Yeah. But before we move on to our next portion, we have a new merch. So think for yourself. Question everything and break free from the so-called truths that they want you to accept. The Axiom Amnesia collection is here. Bold logo, t-shirts, and hoodies designed for thinkers like you who refuse to settle for the assumptions. Stand out and make a statement. Show the world you don't just go along, you think critically. Plus, it's a great way to support the channel and keep the work that we do here going. Get yours today. The link is in the description, or you can visit us anytime at axiom.app.
Now we're going to spoil the film for you.
So if you don't want the film spoiled, go ahead and hop on off the call.
But is it spoiled if you read the Bible story?
I would have liked it to have been spoiled because I read the Bible story. I would have liked it to be spoiled, but I'm always surprised at what the reimagining in a modern world would look like, right? Because there were a lot of things in the biblical story where, obviously the setting is going to be very different. So I'm always excited for that. But
what if it's just the spirit of it?
Well, this was clearly just the spirit of it, and only a couple of aspects of the film and some very critical things were left out.
So happened?
Let's just get on with what happens in the film.
Okay.
So we start off with Soraya's character playing Ruth, and Ruth is a singer, and we see Ruth, and she's got a boyfriend. Her boyfriend happens to be Phylicia Rashad's son, right? So Ruth, we find out early on that she was like an orphan. She grew up in foster care system. So she has like a very, a terrible background as far, tumultuous and just a hard life that she's had thus far. But she's got this wonderful singing talent. And then she has been working with, she's got a friend that she's in a group with, and that is Brianna. And so Brianna's like the rapper, she's the singer and whatever. So when this film opens, we see her on stage and she's singing and, doing kind of the typical stuff that happens with songs where you're showing your body, so all of the things that would be sort of anti-modesty, religious type of behaviors, right? And so she's there, and then her boyfriend is there, and her boyfriend's like, introducing her to his mother and father. So she meets the parents and stuff. At the same time, JD is there, Jermaine Dupri, and he's offering her a record contract. Now, this guy, played by James Lee Thomas, Cyrus, is the guy who has like been her manager. He's got a deal with her, a contract with her. He has supported her. Paid her rent and everything like that because he saw the talent, he believed in her, and so he's shopping her around. Now he wants her to make this album. JD's interested, and so he's finally going to get some payback on his investment in her talent, right? With her group. But in this moment, she's like, I don't know what I should do. I feel very torn. I really don't think I want to do this. And, so this is where we are at the beginning of the film. So then basically what happens after that is that she is feeling torn. And then she finally is like, okay, she tries it. She tries to go in the studio and record. And then she's just like, I'm really not feeling like this. I don't want to do this anymore. I feel led in another direction in my life, And so she's been religious, she believes in God and she's a Christian. And so then Cyrus, he's like, look, I done all this stuff for you, and now it's time for you to pay me back. So don't play with me. Go in here, make this album, and you can do whatever you want to do after you make this album for me. But we under contract. You need to do what you need to do for me, and I'm not playing with you. So then we're like, okay, this dude is really tripping out. But she tells him, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do this. So then the next thing you know, she gets this call, and it's from Felicia Rashad's character, who is playing Naomi. And basically, when she gets called to the hospital and her boyfriend's father and her boyfriend have been shot, they do not survive the shooting. So she's there with her friend Brianna at the hospital, along with Naomi, who's played by Felicia Rashad, when she gets the news. The way Felicia Rashad cried in the moment after she found out, it broke my heart. And she lost her son at the same time as her husband right there in this house. So she's alone. She has nobody. Now, one thing you should know from the beginning also is that they don't have a relationship, in the story of the Bible. And let me just stop and just, for those of you who do not know the Bible story. So the way the Bible story goes is there's a woman, Naomi, her and her husband move to the country of Moab. They're from Bethlehem. So they move to the country of Moab, and then they have 2 sons. And essentially, long story short, the 2 sons and the husband die, but not before the sons are married. One son is married to Ruth, and the other son is married to Orpah, right? And by the way, just a little trivia, Oprah Winfrey actually was named after Orpah, who is the daughter-in-law of Naomi from the Bible, but they misspelled her name, and that's how it became Oprah. But anyway, so then when both of Ruth's sons and husband die, she's left and she's like, okay, I need to go back home to my land. She tells both of these women who are from Moab to go back to their people, go back to your mamas so that you can remarry, right? Because they don't have any way to be taking care of their women at this time in history. And you know how that goes, right? So Orpah does what she's told and goes back to her family. But Ruth is like, no. Ruth says, she is dedicated to Naomi. They have a relationship. This is her mother-in-law. She's like, I will not leave you. And where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. She is down for her 100%. Right. So that's one thing. That's very different in this movie where when they meet, they don't know each other. They're just meeting at the beginning of the film. So they don't have any relationship. And you'll see why that's important later. So back to the biblical story of Ruth. So we have Naomi and Ruth. They go back to Bethlehem, and then basically Ruth goes in the fields in order to work so that she can have, get money. And then the field that they go to belongs to this man named Boaz. And so Boaz is really nice to her because he heard of her loyalty to her mother-in-law. Boaz is also a distant relative of the family. And so then Ruth, when she tells her mother-in-law, like, hey, Boaz was kind to me, he let me glean through his field and take the leftovers from when they were doing the harvest and, whatever. So because Boaz was like a close relative of Naomi's husband's family, they have this whole thing back then where they were obligated to, like, if a man dies, you're obligated to take on, or you're not obligated, but you're obliged. You can take on and marry the wife so that the family name can continue and so on. So when they find that out, Naomi tells Ruth, hey, go in there where Boaz sleeps at night because he slept on the threshing floor, related to the harvest and all of that. So she tells him, go and just go to his feet, uncover his feet, and then await his instructions after you talk to him and whatever. And so she goes in and she's like, I'm your handmaid, and spread your robe over your handmaid. In other words, cover me, basically she's saying, take care of me. So she's making the first move here, because you are a redeemer kinsman. So in other words, you can redeem this family name and all of that. And so Boaz acknowledges that. He says, okay, I agree to do it. But then they find out that there's another relative who's closer, who has kind of first dibs at this. And so when they check with that relative, he says, no, I'm not interested in doing that. So then Boaz goes ahead and said, all right, well, he marries her. And then, they get married and everything is happily ever after. And they're able to redeem the property. They're able to just basically be restored, Ruth and Naomi and their family and all that they lost in that sense, right? Because of what Boaz did. And by the way, Boaz, he had money. He was, had resources and all of the stuff that these women needed to kind of help, in addition to the legal aspect of redeeming them, right? And so when Boaz and Ruth get married, they have a son. Their son's name is Obed. Naomi's happy, and then Obed becomes the father of Jesse, right? And then Jesse's the father of David. So then of King David from the Bible. Hello, we should know, if you know the Bible, you know who King David is. And so then Ruth is the great grandmother of King David. And then, of course, we know that King David is in the direct line as an ancestor of Jesus Christ in the Bible. So that's the story of what happens. And so the main things you take away from this biblical story are, number one, the dedication that Ruth had to Naomi, her mother-in-law, because she was married to her son. She had a personal relationship. And this is the story of love and dedication. Hey, I'm down for you. I'm not going to leave you and go back just because you were alone. I'm still down for you. I'm loyal. This is who Ruth was. And then you also have Naomi with her love for Ruth. So the missing part in this movie is the fact that they're just meeting each other, and Naomi doesn't even like Ruth when she first meets her, because she looks at Ruth like she's sort of beneath us because we have money and everything. And who is this girl who's undulating on the stage that you done brought around? So that's number one. And, and we'll talk more about it, but to be able to compare, but you needed to know that story for good context. So after Naomi's husband and son are killed, then they have the funeral. Ruth is all sad and everything. And then Cyrus shows up at the funeral and basically makes it clear that he had something to do with the deaths. It wasn't supposed to go like that. Something went wrong or whatever. But anyway, the point was to prove to Ruth that you're not getting ready to play with me or my money. So he is like the villain. He's the bad guy in this story, right? And so then Naomi at the same time finds out at the funeral, okay, that her husband is basically over leveraged with his businesses because he's rich. They got a big, huge house and all of that. And her husband is over leveraged with the businesses. And now he's got to go and now she doesn't have anything. So like she literally has nothing except the guy the planner or the lawyer or whatever he is. He tells her, hey, look, we kept the house in Tennessee because they're in Atlanta, so you could, you got a house. I kept it in your name. So she doesn't have a dime to her name. She has nothing. They're about to auction everything off. There's a foreclosure notice on the house. And so just like in the story, pretty much Naomi becomes destitute after the loss of her husband and sons. So Naomi said, okay, well, I guess I'm going back to Tennessee. So Naomi gets on the bus to go to Tennessee. Ruth at the same time goes back to Naomi's house to try to see where Naomi is. And then the person tells her, hey, Naomi's headed. She at the bus station. So Naomi ain't even got the money to fly nowhere. Naomi is literally about to be on a Greyhound. And so here comes Ruth running up, and she decides that she's getting ready to get on this bus with Naomi. Naomi's like, you're not coming with me. Why are you here? Because again, they're not friends. They don't know each other. She was just there at the worst point in her life when she finds out that her husband and son have been killed. So anyway, Ruth gets on the bus. She tells Naomi, I'm gonna go where you go or whatever. But in this story, Ruth is running away from this man who wants her to fulfill her contractual obligations. And the thing about the story in the Bible is that Ruth stays with Naomi because she's loyal and they have a relationship and she loves her, not because she's running from something else. So now you done watered down the story, and that started to piss me off a little bit when I started comparing these stories. And so anyway, Ruth, she goes with Naomi. They go to Tennessee and they see the house. They ain't been in this house for a couple of decades. It's all worn down. It's, needs to be painted. Just a whole bunch of mess going on at the house. And, but these two women, they are there. Ruth tapes up the window and stuff so the animals and whatever won't just come directly into the house. And, Naomi is really dealing with her heavy grief from the loss of her son and husband. So then Ruth is like, well, I got to make some money. So Ruth goes out. She's looking for a job. And then she sees what appear to be kind of like day laborers who work at a vineyard in the area. And so they're like, oh, you ain't cut out for this kind of work. Because, they see her dressed up and she's looking cute. And they're about to go work in these fields. And she's like, well, let me come with you. So she goes and she gets on the truck to go be like a day laborer in the vineyard. And because they need extra help. So when she arrives there, then they're showing her how to pick these grapes. And that is her job. And this is where she meets Lena. And Lena is, befriends her or whatever. And they, showing her the ropes on how to pick these grapes. Now, this is where we're also introduced to Boaz. Now, his name is Bo and his last name is Astra, and they call him Boaz. I was like, okay, that's real cute. I like how y'all did that. So when Boaz sees Ruth, he looking at her like, so it's all on how good she looks to him. And he's, basically paying attention. Now, from his point of view, Boaz's backstory is that his father has died and left him this vineyard, and he is there trying to work the vineyard, and he's trying to come up with like a special blend of wine that can win this contest, and basically to put him on the map so that he can have the money to keep his vineyard, everything going, and just be a success. So that's his backstory. So when he sees her, this is what's going on. He's interested in talking to her, but he sends down word, hey, give her a permanent spot so she could be here. At the same time, and I'm gonna fast forward a little bit, but at the same time, Ruth is making, friends there. She's friends with Lena. They hear her humming and singing. And then one of the guys she works with realizes, oh, we seen you online. You're from this group and whatever. She's like, oh, I'm not in the group anymore. Right. So she's trying to be incognito in Tennessee. Every time I think of Tennessee, I think about, like she's in this rural area. She's come from Atlanta and keep a low profile. But Lena takes, Lena is like, oh, okay, you can sing. So then she says, well, why don't you come out with us to the club or whatever? And it's a club where they sing country music. And so she goes and then she winds up singing on stage because Lena's puts her name on the list to sing in this karaoke. So she sings a country song because that's what you're supposed to sing there. And who is there, of course, but Boaz. And Boaz sees it and he just is even more falling in love with her. He's like, So he tries to talk to her, but she's playing him off every time she sees him because she's not interested. Obviously, she's preoccupied with everything going on in her world and whatever. Also, this secret that she has, she knows that she is part of the reason why Cyrus has killed her boyfriend and her, and his father. And, here she is with Naomi, and Naomi doesn't know any of this. So she's there and, he tries to talk to her. She finds out that he's the one who he owns the vineyard at this point because she didn't know who he was. She just assumed he was the manager or somebody in charge, but she didn't know he actually owned it. So then she sees him at work later and stuff like that. And, it's clear that he's very, very interested. In the meantime, when she sang on stage, Lena had recorded it and Lena puts it online and then it gets a whole bunch of views and Lena's telling her and she's like, take it down, Lena, take it down. And so Lena takes it down. But of course, we know that this is somebody's going to see it. Cyrus is going to see it. And Cyrus is sending her messages this whole time like, look, I'm finna come get you. So keep playing. I'm going to find you and you going to basically do what you're supposed to do for me. For those of you who don't know, you should visit axiom.app. And you'll be able to look at all of the recent videos across all of our channels. And I'm putting that on the screen right now just so y'all can see it and see what it looks like. Because there are a ton of videos that are over there. And also, I think that there are at least about 100 exclusive videos that are available for our Patreon members and our YouTube members. So, if you're interested in more of our content, as I've seen many of you binge watching, be sure to check those things out. So at the same time, the relationship between, they start talking, Ruth and Boaz, they start talking to one another. Naomi is still dealing with her grief, but Naomi knew Boaz from when he was a child. And instead of Boaz being a relative of Naomi's, first off, that's another thing. Ruth wasn't married to Naomi's son, which and I know it's modern and people ain't getting married no more and all that, but it just sets up a different type of feeling of loyalty and obligation here, and it made Ruth's actions in this film be very self-serving as opposed to feeling like she had a duty, and her love for Naomi making her why she stayed and was loyal to her. So that's one thing. The second thing is in the movie, Naomi and Boaz are not related. She said that Boaz's daddy, the one who had died, was friends with Naomi, was a good friend, and she knew him and she knew the son. He was a little boy and she knew him back then. And he was always good. And she was like, I wonder whatever happened to him. And then she realizes that this is Boaz. So when Ruth sees this, when Naomi sees kind of the sparks flying between Ruth and Boaz, she's like, you all would be a good fit for one another and so on. She does, you could tell she's thinking that her wheels are turning and she wants them to talk to one another. So, what you think is going to happen happens. Ruth starts falling for him and he starts falling for her, but he has a lot of resources and stuff, but she continues to work in the vineyard and all that. And when he realizes what an amazing singer that she is, this is where Babyface comes in, because he's like, I'm gonna take you to Nashville. He takes her to Nashville, introduces her to Babyface, and she's like, oh my gosh, this is Babyface. He's like, yeah, I hear you can sing. And then they sit down and they sing a song at the piano. And I was like, okay, I love Babyface. I love seeing him in a movie.
I like people doing the piano. So lately, Babyface been going around playing a guitar and it's been pissing me off.
Because you like him playing the piano.
Yeah.
So then they, so we get the Babyface thing. And so now we see she's writing songs with Babyface. She's spending time with this. So Boaz is helping to make her dreams come through the resources and the connections that he has. But we still got this thing looming over her head where Cyrus is looking for her or whatever. And so she winds up talking back to her friend from home. That's Brianna. And Brianna's like, yeah, Cyrus is mad. He's looking for you. Stay out there where you are. And did you know that, he knows where you are now because, they saw the video online. So then we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. We're waiting for Cyrus to show up. And eventually, of course, Cyrus does show up with some goon looking for her to take her back so that he can, recoup and she can do this record deal with JD or whatever. Now, in the meantime, they had tried to get another girl to replace her in the group, but the other girl couldn't sing and it just wasn't working out. So he was just really frustrated with the whole thing because JD was like, this ain't the girl I picked and all that. So when he shows up looking for her, it just happens that she was at the club with Lena. She gets a call from the hospital, and they're saying that it's Felicia Rashad's character Naomi, who is in the hospital. Her blood pressure done got too high, and she's gonna be okay, but this is what gets her out of the club in just the nick of time, because Cyrus and his goons show up. But when they're there, they're told that, hey, this guy Boaz over there knows her, and she was just here talking to him. So he goes over to Boaz to ask him, hey, I'm looking for this girl. You seen her? And he's like, oh, like, what you want with her? Boaz is solid. Boaz is like, I'm not giving you no information about her. He was like, and who you say you were? So then Cyrus, is just like, oh, never mind. And so he just leaves at that moment, right? And another thing that happened, Naomi and Ruth were living in this house that was all shambles, tore down. And, in the process, Ruth has started going to church at the church where Naomi used to be. One of the things that Naomi had an issue with was, her pride was an issue. She left there rich with a husband and son and everything. And she comes back destitute to this house that is all worn down and looking like a shack. She's embarrassed. She feels like the people in town will talk. She doesn't want to go to church. Another huge thing that didn't happen in the biblical story is that she loses her faith. She's just like, basically, I don't want to go to church anymore because, my sons are dead. My husband is dead. I have nothing. Everything has been taken from me. And so she has lost her faith in this story. So that's another reason she doesn't want to go to church. But the church does come, and they see that they need, because the house is jacked up. The church comes. Boaz then bought them a car. They come and they do the work of painting. So all these people get the house back up, and the house looked quite nice, So anyway, we know Cyrus is in town. Cyrus rolls up, and we get to kind of almost the climax of the film. Now, Boaz has been working on his special his special blend so that he can win this contest or whatever and get maybe best in show or whatever for his wine. And there's this shindig that he's having, and so he has that, at the point when she realizes that she is the target, Cyrus is not going to let go. She, this love thing she got going with Boaz is just too much, because, she's risking him and all of that. But she goes to the shindig and she realizes, like, I really do want to be with Boaz. So he has this party, and she goes up there and she sings this song that she's written for him or whatever about, faith and having lost faith and all of that. And then at the shindig is where Cyrus shows up looking for her, and he's there. When she sees that, she finishes her song, but then she looks around, and what's on fire but part of the vineyard where the wine bottles are being stored. And so everything is lost in this moment. And so when everything is lost, it's just, he's devastated. And then after they're cleaning up for the fire the next morning, when the fire marshals and people are doing their investigation, that's when Ruth runs away, and she just realizes that she just can't get away. Her past has caught up with her. So everything comes to a head at the house where Naomi is, and Cyrus is over there with Naomi. And basically he's going to threaten and do something to harm Naomi, which he already warned early in the film that he would do if Ruth didn't do what he wanted her to do. So he's there, and then he's like, Ruth, you better get on back here because I got Naomi. So Ruth runs to the house and then she leaves Boaz's side, even though they have hooked back up and agreed, to be together. And so then when she goes there, they get into an altercation, and basically we see Naomi, start fighting old boy, because he thinks he's just about to have the upper hand. Then Boaz shows up when he realizes what's going down over there. Long story short, of course, Boaz wins, and Naomi is holding a gun on Cyrus, and she's just like,
so
look.
Naomi won.
Yeah, Naomi won, and she's like, you don't mess with my daughter. Now, this is significant because, Naomi was acting like she didn't like Ruth even earlier in the film, and, as the film goes on, but she had grown to love this young girl and feel like she was her daughter.
Because she was bringing home the bacon.
Well, and because, she was all she really had at this point.
Yeah.
Lost her husband, lost her sons. So she really did love her. And of course, all of her life, Ruth needed a mother because Ruth was abandoned by her mother when she was 5. And so, now the mother has a daughter that she never had. The daughter has a mother, and they both got Boaz because Boaz can be her new son. And Ruth's, and they get together, and then that's pretty much it's happily ever after. But let me tell you, so they decide with the winery, they're going to go and they're going to look at it. They taste the wine and they realize that the wine is even better. It has somehow survived the fire. The wine is even better than it was. They go and they get the award that they wanted to get so that the, people, that the wine would sell and all of this. And I was thinking to myself, how they going to reproduce burnt wine?
What you mean? You figure out what temperature it
well,
was
I guess you're going to have to play
way.
around with it. So anyway, but they won. It was happily ever after. And then in the end, because Naomi is narrating the entire story. And then in the end, they just talk about how love wins and, the biblical connection to that. And it's the end. I felt good. It was a feel good story as long as I was ignoring the biblical basis of the story. It felt good, like in a Hallmark way. It was a good love story and they really loved each other. Yep. They get married in the end and it was happily ever after.
And their next film, King Solomon.
Really?
No, I'm just...
Oh, bruh, listen. Because let me tell y'all for real, I was kind of like, please do not, I jokingly, because we always reference that Shirley Caesar song, where at the beginning, they're like, Shirley's out there playing with God. I was like, please do not let them be playing with the Lord like this, with these stories, right? Because people will take the story and think that that's what happened, right? Because a lot of times people don't read. So what they see as the depiction is what they take away. And there were a lot of things from the original story that are just missing. So we talked about the fact that Naomi and Ruth don't. So the whole relationship between Naomi and Ruth and what they had in the beginning to me was ignored. That was a big issue for me because this is a love story, but it's not only romantic love. It is love. It is love based on duty and loyalty and your attachment that you have to the person because you know them, right? And that's we miss that. We miss that because they didn't have a relationship coming into it. Also, like they weren't married, and that was important to me too. I know we got to modernize it, but I don't know how I felt about that. I just, so that was missed. Then let's talk about how solid Boaz was. So Boaz was a man who's going to do things by the rules in the biblical story. And so was this Boaz. But they concentrated on that Boaz in the movie thought she was oh so fine. She was looking good.
Hire her.
That he had to hire her and pursue her. But see, in the Bible version of it, Ruth makes the first move. She makes the first move to say, I'm open to this. And then he is like, okay, I got you. Now, of course, he had observed who she was. But in the movie, I feel it's watered down because he just looking at her with a lustful eye. Now, she did ask why he wasn't married in the movie and all that. He's like, well, basically, the typical, I ain't found the right one, all that.
He said, don't ask me.
So, but I do feel that the concentration on just her physical, and of course she was beautiful, Sariah is beautiful, but the concentration on the physical aspect of it ignores the lesson from the biblical story, which is that he looked at her character. It was, in the biblical story, he says, everyone knows you a fine woman, like a good woman because of your loyalty to Naomi. And we all see this. And obviously she was, probably beautiful too, but like it was her character that mattered the most to him because let's face it, Boaz, any man with money at that point in time in history, and probably even now, could have had a wife if that was what he wanted. You know what I'm saying? So clearly, and could have had a beautiful wife, right? So clearly there were things that mattered more than that in that moment to him in terms of the character of the woman that he would tie himself to. Also, the idea that, because it comes out that Ruth, that she knew. So eventually, Naomi in the movie finds out that Ruth was connected to the murders of her husband and son. And then she's like, well, it wasn't your fault and whatever, but I wish you could have trusted me to tell me. That's like, so it's quick forgiveness from Naomi. And then also, you know, her man that she loves, vineyard, gets burned down because of this connection that she hasn't confessed. Now I get in and I understand that she was probably really scared and all of these other things. But you know, it takes away from the character of who Ruth was as a person and makes her kind of like making these understandable but yet not exceptional decisions in the film that we see now. The reason, listen, there was nothing wrong when we in the biblical story, there was Orpah and there was Ruth, the two daughters-in-law. And Naomi say to both of them, go back to your people. Orpah went back to her people. There was nothing wrong with Orpah's decision. But the exceptionalism is when Ruth says, hey, wherever you go, I will go. I am loyal to you. I will do, your people will be my people, because she took that oath of her marriage to her son, her love for her, and the relationship that they have bonded seriously. So she was willing to give it all up to go and do for the mother-in-law. That's what made her exceptional. But in the movie, this girl is just trying to run from stuff. In the biblical story, Ruth knew who she was the whole time. We not over here like, well, do I really want to sing? Do I not want to sing? And I guess that infused some, you know, but like, come on. What about her not having these characters and being able to, these character flaws that we see in the film? So that was a problem. But, you know, Boaz is like, you know, you did basically lie by omission, but I forgive you, you know, and all of this and that. So she's given a lot of grace, but I do think that it besmirches the name of Ruth and the idea of Ruth as this character. Because, like, okay, Ruth is the only book in the Bible that is named after a woman. Like this is like one of the best stories. Now, I do like Esther and the story of Esther in the Bible, but Ruth, you know, this is top tier, top notch stuff, and we can't be playing with Ruth. Again, like I said, if this wasn't called Ruth and Boaz, okay, fine. But it was. And so these are just the stark contrasts I see between the way it played out. So, you know, so that's kind of how I feel about it and why I felt like I felt about the fact that we're calling this Ruth and Boaz. But I do think that, you know, the younger generation, I feel, is looking for something different. You know, we talk a lot about how, you know, the idea of love and the love songs ain't love songs anymore. Everything is about, you know, get the bag, get whatever. You know, there is room. People are looking for something more. And why do you feel like instead of just giving an option as something different, we need to bend in the direction that we see the current culture going?
Yeah, well, I guess that's kind of what has to happen, though, right? Because it is seen that the changes that happen in society are for the best, right? Just think about the changes of the 50s and 60s, and if the media didn't bend to that.
Well,
those
right.
changes. So
we're at that point where people are tired. Like I think we're gonna see a resurgence of love in a sense, right? Of people being like, I want to be married. I want, you know, what we would call traditional families and stuff like that. I do think we're gonna see a resurgence of that. And you know, because we've seen what has happened in the last few generations with how these things have played out, and I do think that people are gonna return to that on some level. But I don't know. So what did you think? Like, was it a good story to you? Like, is there?
No.
So, yeah. So this just wasn't up your alley, to be fair.
Chasing somebody down over a record deal is, you know.
Yeah.
It
was very typical in that respect.
Cliché, simple.
A lot of missed opportunities. There are a lot of missed opportunities.
Because, like, when you come up with that, and she's going to run away because she... You know, because they want her to sing, basically, and they done this other thing, killed her boyfriend. I would have thought, hey, is there a better way to have her leave?
Well, here's the question I would have. What good qualities did Ruth in the movie have? What was good other than she could sing? That was like a God-given talent.
She turned down money, maybe?
She turned down money and said, I want to, you know, follow my own mind. I feel driven to do something else different.
She was willing to work.
She was willing to work and take care of her, yes.
Normal.
But see,
like, you want a cookie?
Yeah. You know, so because I want to add these things up, and I'm just like, you're just not measuring up to the Ruth in the original story.
Well.
And I just think that they could have made it where they were married, even if they were married a short time. That could have been modern, or like they just got married and this thing happens.
But it ain't like people ain't married. So,
well, why did we have to have this whole aspect of Cyrus? Why did Cyrus have to be in there? There was no Cyrus character in the original story, but maybe they felt the original story just wasn't.
Why did she even need an ex?
I guess good enough.
Well, it ain't even a mother-in-law, so I don't know.
Yeah, so like it's because the reason you would do things is not there. Like the motivation for the character is not there. So then when I look at Ruth's decisions in the movie, Ruth was running from town and, hey, I might as well go be with Naomi. Look, Naomi got a crib. Ruth ain't have nothing. She needed a place to be. So it's not extraordinary that she would go where Naomi went, because you needed a place to be because you was trying to run from this man. That's very different than to say, I could go. See, in the biblical story, it's clear that Ruth would be better off if she went back to her people because they could take care of her. She had what she needed there, but she was willing to go with a woman who had nothing and sacrifice, and she went against her best interest to be loyal to Naomi in the biblical story. In this story, Ruth's interest is to go with Naomi because you need to get away and you ain't got nothing to, hey, at least it's a house in Nutbush or wherever the heck you gonna wind up,
yeah,
so that's the thing, but again, if I didn't know, if this was not called Ruth and Boaz, I'd have been like, oh, because I love these kinds of stories. And Phylicia Rashad is amazing. The actors in here were amazing. And I liked the love story aspect of it. I did. I loved that part. I just didn't like it being called Ruth and Boaz. So that concludes our review of Ruth and Boaz. Go to the comments and let us know what you think about this film. It is streaming on Netflix, like we said. If you watched it, what did you think? And did you know the biblical story? And if you did, was that an issue for you or was it not? I know a lot of you guys are Christians or are familiar with the story, so you can at least have that as some points of context for the things that we discussed here. But I'd be interested in knowing what you guys think.
If you made it this far, type shindig in the comments so we'll know you're one of the real ones who stick around to the end.
How am I supposed to spell shindig? I don't know how to spell that. Anyway, be sure to visit axiom.app, where you can find all of our recent videos in one place with links to them back on YouTube. And also our merch is at axiom.app too.